Okay, perfect. So, hi everyone. Welcome again, Maanik, to ADPList plus DesignBoat group sessions. I'm Devki, as I've said before, I'm Devakinandini, and I'm the strategic experience designer and all your host for today. I'm very glad all of you could make it for this session, and I hope you all attended the previous session that we had with Maanik 2 weeks back. It was mainly about designing product experiments, and we went into the depths of the different types of product experiments and how we can use that to measure the success of a product, basically. So it
Yeah.
was all about metrics. And we also got to hear a little bit about how it's done in Airtel. So if you guys have missed that session, don't worry. We have a recording on YouTube and you can check it out later. So for today's session, Maanik Sinha, who is the design lead at Airtel, is here to tell us about the basics of setting up a design process for our company. So I absolutely loved our previous session and eager for today's session. How are you doing, Maanik?
Great, yeah. First of all, thank you for having me here, giving one more opportunity to talk to so many people. It's always so exciting, and I love when people start reaching out after the call with all their queries. It really thinks that somewhere, whatever you are trying to express, people are actually understanding. People are somewhere relating to it. So, thanks for this opportunity, and thanks ADPList for this opportunity. So yeah,
Absolutely.
hi everyone. This is Maanik. Uh, I'll start by introducing myself. So my name is Maanik Sinha, and I'm based out of Delhi HCR, and I am currently working as a senior design lead at Airtel. And at Airtel, I look into the entertainment side of Airtel, which basically take care of the media consumption. As in the first medium is the audio media, where there's an application called Wink Music, where user is able to consume the music that he likes, and then there is a creator side to it, which is called Wink Studio, where we enable the new and upcoming artists to basically launch their songs on a platform and start earning through it. And
So, Anik, just one second. I think someone's saying they can't hear anything. Can the others hear? I just want to check once.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sorry, continue.
yeah, so maybe if you are not able to hear anything, try maybe rejoining. That might help. So yeah, I'll just continue with my intro itself. So on the other mediums, I we also have a video consumption platform which is called Airtel Extreme, where it's like an OTT app which is available on all the mobile platform as well as large screen TVs. And corresponding to it, there is a backend app which allows the curation of the content so that we can manage what content goes up, what content goes down, and how to make that selection even more easier for the user. And then there is third product which is called gaming, Airtel Gaming, which is about to be launched. I think it would be launched around 15th of May or 20th of May. We are in the process to launch that. That product is about again centered to the new creators, the new gamers who want to be famous, who want to start earning through their gaming skills. So they can come to the platform, they can start streaming on it, and basically start earning basis. This is the number of streams that they receive. And my journey through design has been like I have about 10 years of experience and started from being an engineer to a photographer, then to a traveler, and then ended up being a UX designer. uh, Worked with companies like Infosys, Wipro, the startups like Paytm, Urban Company, and then also like currently I'm working with Airtel. So this is pretty much about me. So coming to the topic that we have today, that how can we set up a design process at any company, at usually the company that we are working on. So it's a it's a task, I'll say, to be very frank, just to start, before just to end before we enter this complete conversation. It's a task. It's a big task, because in India, the origin of Indian IT sector was majorly majorly the service-based companies, where the companies were actually providing any maintenance or development services to the clients who are sitting abroad, right? Because of which they were always very much development centric, and there were used to be no designers at these kind of places. I remember 10 years back when I was working at Infosys, there were hardly a team of one or two designers working with maybe hundreds of products, because their assumption was that the client who is giving the requirement, they will come up with the designs, they will give those kind of solutions, and the agenda of the company is to deliver the product on time. When the startup age came in India, which is not very long back, I think about 5 to 10 years back, that was a time when actually people started creating their own products, and where the complete uh, positioning of design became a little stronger in the complete product development ecosystem in India. So why I'm telling that, because since the companies are still very new, uh, so even today when someone starts a startup, they start hiring a development team or tech team first, and then a designer. So as a designer, you might have to put in a lot of effort of maybe prove a lot of things to make sure that a design process is set up inside the company. Having said that, let's just look at, maybe let's just talk about the design process itself. Let maybe in a gist. So whenever someone asks you what is the design process, usually people start talking about those 5 to 7 stages where you ideate, you prototype, you create, right? But if you look at the design process from a holistic view, so design process is more like a tool which helps you break down the complete large project into different chunks, smaller chunks, which are easier to handle, and which kind of enables you to deliver a product which is meeting the customer's expectation, right? And majorly it's used in companies like in technology companies, in architecture companies, and even the manufacturing companies. And whole focus is that to deliver more and more focused product towards the customer's needs and wants. To ensure all this, what happens that users feedback are taken at various intervals to make sure that whatever the customer expectations are, they are documented and the product is meeting their expectation. And this kind of feedback at times does take place even before starting the product itself, maybe investing itself. First you would want to make sure that your idea is validated, only then you would want to go ahead and maybe invest money or time in your idea or company. So uh, what are these 7 steps that I just mentioned about design process? So I believe that design process is a little subjective based on each industry, but still it can be divided or moreover categorized into 7 steps, which can talk about problems, research, planning, prototyping, and a lot more. Basically, these 7 steps in a particular sequence are identifying the problem, very first step, researching it in depth, ideating the possible solution, evaluating it, creating a prototype, testing and troubleshooting, and making the improvements. Let's just talk about one step at a time. I just want to have a let's just have a common discussion around what design processes and what each and every step looks like. So very first step, which is identifying the problem statement. So this is the, I believe, the most crucial step of the complete design process, because in it, if I can talk from a perspective of a person who's working in a corporate industry, a lot of time the problems which are given to you, people who are delivering that problem, they are themselves not very clear about it, what the problem is. They might directly come to you with a solution saying maybe change the color of this button, and that's it. they might not want to, they might not be able to articulate that problem. So it becomes the responsibility of the designer to basically identify what exactly problem to be solved. To do that, a designer need to have a very strong questioning skill. So there are certain questions that you need to ask at this stage, like what problems do you want to solve, who has this problem, what are the limitations, and what are the goals that we want to achieve. Then let's talk about the second step, which is the uh, research step, where you try to research the problem in depth. So at this stage, you usually do a benchmarking or a competitive analysis to understand what are the competitors in the market, if there is a problem existing holistically in the market itself. Uh, so and also try to understand if there is a competitor, what are the things that he is doing and what are the things that maybe he is neglecting about the user itself. Again, few questions very important to answer during this step. These are: is there any existing solution? Are they failing to meet the customer needs? And can we do something similar? As in, if there is a some solution already existing, can we maybe deliver something similar or get inspiration from? Then comes the third step, which is ideate the possible solution, where you try to uh, follow a how might we framework to create a list of ideas that can be the possible solutions.
I
Uh,
have a question regarding the previous point. So you said to see if there's something similar, right? Can we do something similar? So I just want you to address if it is okay to do something similar. So if there's already a solution, is it fine for you to develop a product with a similar solution? What is the
I I
chance?
believe it's completely fine. It's there is like it's a basic concept of why do you want to reinvent a wheel? There is a problem out there. Why don't you try to solve it with a existing solution? And like a very basic law of UX is that you develop a behavior in a user, right? So if user has all, either you develop a new behavior or you try to utilize the maximum out of the behavior which already user has developed. For example, likes, right? Facebook introduced likes, which
Yeah,
was very new, right? It was something which no one was using. But
correct.
the moment when Facebook introduced that, people started using it. Then why would someone want to do something new? It user might not be able to comprehend it altogether. So
Right.
the easier way could be that since user know how likes function, why not use it and maybe use it in a way that is helpful to your problem, right?
Okay.
So
So
it's completely fine. It's not copy. Don't think that you're copying a solution. But if it's there, I'll say get an inspiration, figure out how can you utilize that and have a similar if there have utilize a similar behavior and then make maximum out of it, I believe.
okay. So you can have similar features, but the core problem that you're solving must be different, right? Or
That
is that
depends. Like depends. If you're working in a different domain, obviously you will have a different problem. You cannot, like, a Facebook would not have a problem which Instagram is having. Both are
mm,
the both are social media problems, but at Facebook this is little more uh, video centric, right? And lot more ad specific. There is lot more commenting, lot more. There's a different kind of audience there.
okay?
Eh,
Got it.
At Instagram, that evolved more into reels, more into content creation, right? Where Facebook is still consumption. So I believe the based on the platform, based on the product you are working on, problem statement will differ at a certain point because your target audience is different. But you can obviously make use of the behavior which are already developed in the user. So I don't think there is any wrong in that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was talking about the third step, which was editing the problem solution. So here we use how might we framework. Like we try to answer questions like how might we achieve X, where X can be a certain idea. And at this time, at this stage, we also talk about the further details, as in how much is the scope of the project, how much is the timeline, how much timeline are we targeting, when do we want to release it. And during this session, we try to come up with ideas. This can be a group session where maybe a group of people can write their ideas on a sticky note, post it, put it there somewhere, and then maybe try to understand where the idea is going. And at times, people also prefer to have a lone session where they want to ideate on their own. So it's again completely fine both the ways. Then come the fourth point, which is evaluating the solution. So during this evaluation point, we try to evaluate that if this particular solution is actually suiting the timelines that we have at hand, and if it's actually aligning with the true user needs, and if there is a differentiator, like what we just mentioned about, if we need a differentiator or not, if we can directly start using a solution which is already existing, or if there's a differentiator, if there's something that different is being done, taking all these calls and then trying to figure out which idea is something that we would want to pick. So and at times, usually what happens at these kind of scenarios in an organization, that there's an approval committee or seniors who tries to give you a go ahead about a solution, that let's go with this because those people might have a better idea of the whole business, right? So what happens? A quick tip here, that if such is a scenario where you're working in a company where maybe you are a junior designer and there are maybe senior people or business heads who had to take this call. So I would suggest that you take a quick yes or no right at the initial stage of the ideation, so that you don't waste your further time in jotting it down or detailing it down, and then later on realizing that this idea is not even picked at all. There are scenarios when you have multiple solutions at your ease. So at that point, I recommend that you follow a very linear approach where you pick one idea at a time, try to close it. Only reason is that you don't want your team to lose lose their focus, and basically if they lose the focus, the whole the results of that kind of experiment or that kind of a design might not be as per expectation, right? So choose a linear approach, deliver one design, deliver one solution, and then maybe move to next. Fifth part is creating the prototype. So here the most important part is make quick prototype. Don't invest much time in having a high fidelity or maybe a prototype which is aligned to all your brand guidelines. But that's not required. That's not the purpose of the prototype. All you want to have a low fidelity prototype or a partially developed product where maybe you can just get a little feel of how the product will function, and that's it.
Would this
And
be the
then
prototype we share with a group of audience for maybe A/B testing, or would it be just within the company for the time being?
so it happens, it can be both. If you have that timeline, if you have that access to the users, I would always recommend that you go to the customer and then get it evaluated. If not, because there can be scenarios where you might not have your users at ease. For example, if you're uh, making a an making an application for maybe an elderly, you might
Mhm.
not be able to find elderly people so easily or accessible to your corporate corporate scenarios, right? The companies that we work. So it would be fine that maybe you find someone in your close vicinity, which where you can spend more time with the user to understand if they are able to use the prototype or not.
Okay.
And then come the sixth step, which is test and troubleshoot. So here you just test your prototypes, try to understand if user is able to use it or not, and there are certain things that you need to look at or maybe observe or maybe ask question about when this complete testing is happening. So you need to ask the user that did the prototype actually solve the problem, right? Maybe the user might get distracted in the complete usability, but you have to bring back the user back to the basic question: is it solving the problem or not, or did it add any more struggles? to the complete task. And then maybe a few more questions around, was there anything unexpected, so that you can understand how your prototype is actually functioning to the user, right, with the user itself. uh, and one thing that usually happens during this kind of interaction, that we tend to kind of instruct the user in how to use a prototype. Ideally, you should not do that. You should let the user completely interact with it, figure out how to how to use it, because if only he's able to do it at his own ease, only then your prototype is functioning in the best way. In scenarios when you have uh, multiple workers, I would recommend to have an AB. And like we talked about AB in the one of my previous scenarios, that AB test is scenario is a testing scenario where you create multiple versions and basically expose them to different set of users, and then get a feedback accordingly, making a choice that which version is functioning better.
Manik, I think there is some background disturbance because of the earphones, and
Okay.
someone's suggesting if you can disconnect the earphones and talk directly from the.
Sure, that's fine.
No, you're not audible.
Is it better?
Yeah, this is fine.
Okay, then okay, that is good. I hope I'm audible now. So yeah,
Good.
so I was talking about the final step, which is making the improvements. So when you have collated all your feedbacks, you have evaluated all your prototypes, this is the stage where you make those changes according to the user, figure out what things you need to improve on your prototypes. And I believe this is a stage which is kind of a very recursive state, where you create a prototype, validate it, get some feedback, maybe try to revalidate it, and then enter the scenario. So don't worry if there is a scenario where you might have to again make very frequent changes. This is all part of the process.
There is a question from Ada Gupta. I hope I pronounced that right. Asking, how do we avoid falling into a waterfall reactive design process when it comes to feedback from client?
I would just really want to understand what do you exactly mean by when you say waterfall reactive process.
Do you want to unmute and ask?
Hi, thanks for taking my question. It's Ada, by the way.
Sorry.
Um, so when I say how do we avoid falling into a waterfall reactive design process, it's usually clients seem to have a very short-term memory, right? When we start out and we're still talking in terms of abstract solutions, then they're very agreeable in the beginning because they just want to get to the prototype and get to seeing mockups and get the design ready so that they can move into development. But when the
Right.
design's ready and it's in front of them and they're seeing it in a more concrete manner, that's when they start saying, sort of suggesting more feedback, more solutions, like why don't we add this feature as well, and so on. And it kind of, so I guess my question is like, how do you avoid that from with the client and say that no, this is the solution we signed off on, and so this is what we've built out, and this kind of feedback is acceptable, but this kind of feedback is not.
Okay. So basically, when you talk about this, I think this is a very common scenario which happens in any corporate company, right? So there are basically two type of, if I bifurcate them, there are basically two type of conditions when this happens. Very first is that the client itself forgot what feedback did he give, right? And you tend to work on a different feedback. Then he calls off saying, I did not give this feedback. Why are you working on it? So only suggestion here is to have a better communication in place. Document everything. Document your feedbacks. Document the feedback given by the client. Have it in your design file in somewhere so that it's handy to you, and use it whenever required, because that is the core of where you are going towards. Usually, while designing a product, we tend to develop so much of a passion with the design itself that we tend to forget or tend to make mistakes on these kind of documentation. We don't follow these. So one suggestion is that I have also learned during my journey that you need to have very thorough documentation with you documenting all your user feedback, documenting each and every conversation that you have, so that you have a clear path to move ahead. And secondly, this can also happen where maybe you didn't look at the complete problem statement from the holistic scenario. That means, for example, you would have given a you might have been given a problem statement where you might have to work on a notification part. For example, if there is a notification which is coming and you have to create a screen for that, you are completely working in and out to understand the complete user requirement there. You did your best, right? But when it went into development, at that point you might realize that the holistic vision was important, where you have to figure out how the integration of this particular feature will impact or will have recursive effects, repercussions on the other features or the other usabilities of the complete application. So I would suggest make sure that you look at the particular problem statement every time from a holistic point of view, because what happens when you receive a certain problem statement, that becomes the highest priority to you. You put everything to solve that, and then you kind of miss out that the whole ecosystem of the app of the product is more important. Do that and have a proper documentation in place.
Thanks,
I
Maanik.
hope I was able to answer that.
Yeah, she says thank you. Yeah, sorry, we can continue with the session.
Sure. So then let's talk about the core thing that this talk was all about, how to set up a design process in your company. So very first thing is that what I have realized, it's coming out of the personal experience, that when in a company, usually departments act in a very uh, in a way that they leave a dependency. They say that this is not my work, this is your work. For example, if there's a product manager, there's a designer, and there's a developer, they might not want to interact on or maybe help each other on a certain task. They will say, my work is just to design. I'll not take care of the tech effort at all. It's your work to figure out that. So very first thing that we need to be aware of is the product life cycle, product development life cycle, and basically this chart, and you will see that during the product development life cycle, everything comes together. It's a partnership of all the departments. It's all the departments working in a single direction. So the analysis part, the strategic part is being led by the managers, then there is design, then there is development, and then development is usually done by the tech team, and then there is your testing time, which again your developers and you have to work in parallel, right? And then again those maintenance, where maintenance is equivalent to having those frequent interaction with user, getting the exact feedback. So this is where the complete partnership needs to work on. So very first thing, when you want to go ahead and make a point and want to implement a design process in the complete organization, first of all, you have to realize that there has to be a partnership in place. You have to understand and have that perspective in place where everyone is just collaborating and working towards a common goal. You don't have you have your goal, but that is all aligned to a common goal, which is the product. And if you can make this realize to other people as well, it works really best. Next most important thing is user-centered thinking. Being a designer, that is your most powerful tool. User-centered thinking. You talk about user, right? So whenever in every conversation, talk about user, make the user center of your conversations. So, and usually you do a research, you get your insights, right? But you might not be able to get the in-depth user understanding with maybe initial researcher itself. So most important part here is to start developing or having a good relation with your potential customers or the user itself, where maybe you can figure out if there are certain users or certain cohorts who who to whom you can just have much more frequent visits, or maybe have more research sessions targeted to a certain set of users, so that they also have
the understanding of the ecosystem. They also understand, like what I mentioned, that this particular requirement or the change, the experiment that we are trying to evaluate with that user, it just, that particular thing is not only of importance, but the whole ecosystem is the important, right? So try developing that understanding, that relationship with your user, and only then you'll be able to have a user-centered thinking throughout. That is most important part to make sure that you implement the design process in your system. Second thing is, don't let bureaucracy stand in the way of good design. And when I say this, I mean that usually what happens that in companies, uh, normal employees are not being asked about feedbacks, right? There are usually people in the on the higher level, on the management level, that usually make a call about what users are talking about, what should we do about do the product, so that we are talking more about the user or making sure that the needs of user is being landed. And that happens particularly because these people have that understanding of the user. But I'll say it's okay to have to follow them at times, it's fine, but it's not a mandatory thing, right? It cannot be true every time. To do that, again, your power to have that user-centered thinking comes in, where you have to be very strong with your researches, your thoughts on how user is thinking. When that come in place, that vetoes the complete power or the complete vote given by any of the higher level management people person in your complete company. So have that in place. So just talk about users. Again, coming back to the same point. Third point, that making the user data and user insight accessible. So whenever you're going out for research, or whenever you have received any feedback from user, document it, have it ready in a way that you can maybe share it with people anytime, and have that accessible, as in share it with people, maybe put it in a drive, give them a link, they can look at it anytime, because that will then start developing that user centric behavior in others as well. They will start making those business calls, those product related calls, based on the data or based on the insights that you are sharing, the verbatim from the user that you are sharing.
Right. I think this also helps us in not having to explain the designs over and over again if we have the user feedback in place, right?
Exactly. And this is a very, I'll say, a practical scenario, which and also I'll talk about an experience from my past itself. I was working in Paytm, and there was a scenario when Paytm actually acquired a startup in Bangalore to create their POS systems. And POS systems are basically point of sale system where you manage, you take payments, and and these are the machine where you take payments from card, there's a QR there, so all those things. And this company was actually proficient in that. They were making a lot of iterations, but somehow design team at Paytm, we were not very comfortable with what they were making, because we had a certain different expectation. We knew our users very in depth, so we were not very convinced that whatever designs are made will they be usable by the Paytm users. And Paytm users are generally people who are like maybe a sabji wala, right, or maybe a chai wala, who are not very literate. So we were not aligned to designs. This was like one of the presentations when this startup was presenting to Vijay Shekhar Sharma, and we were in the meeting, and I was the one who went out for the research to get all the information. I traveled about 8 different states in India to document all these verbatims, all these insights on how users think, how these Paytm users think, what are their credibility, how they want the product to be. And during that presentation, when this, I just made one slide where there was like 10 to 15 common verbatims told by people about the product. And when the moment it was on that particular screen, on that site, on a slideshow, when Vijay was looking at it, it completely changed the way the product evolved. It was
Right.
completely a different angle. It was more like an eye-opening time that we were not looking at the product in that way. So
Correct.
like what you said, making user data and their insights accessible is one of the parts where you try to make other people also understand how users are thinking.
Correct. Right.
Then again, monitor customer data. So what happens here is that usually as a designer, we are so much involved into the field research or talking to the people that we tend to ignore all the other customer data, right? So here, what you need to do is that you need to collaborate with people like marketing people, customer support people, or the product people, the analytics team. You need to collaborate with them. You need to have that build that partnership, and basically ask for that data. The customer support team is calling hundred of people or maybe thousands of people daily, and they are receiving even more number of calls daily. Those are the people who are actually talking about their problem, what they are not feeling, right?
Yeah.
So you don't need to every time go out and do a field research to understand what is not working and what is working. So
Right. Right.
talk to these people, have the collaboration with marketing and customer support team, most importantly, analytics team, and understand their dashboard, how people are functioning, how people are using your apps. That is one of the best sources to look at. Make that collaboration happen. And this is what will help you to strengthen your user-centric thought process.
Mm.
And the final step is to just to stay close with your own design process. Why I'm saying that, usually when you're working in a company, there are a lot of time that you receive some requirements which are very business centric, that you have to make sure that people pay for something, right?
Yeah.
And because of which, what happens, you tend to divert from your own design process, but turn into a designer who is very much very much just money centric, I'll say. It's just making sure that somehow the person click on this button so that he pays.
Mm.
But that's not the way, right? You have
Yeah.
to even to reach that business goal,
Yeah.
your motive should be you talk from a user's perspective. That okay, you want the business want user to maybe click this button, but how will user, what does the user need, why will user click that button, right? You have to fulfill that. You cannot maybe make that design in a way that it's a blocker, or maybe it's a mandatory thing that person will have to do it. But the other way would be that you introduce transparency or educate your user why
Mm.
this will be better for you, right? And
Yeah.
then eventually you will have that thing that your users will become much more loyal, like very similar to what Apple did when Apple
Right.
launched their products. Microsoft was one of the giants, right? There was Microsoft computer was everywhere, but it was Apple which said that we are looking at that long-term vision. We want to make a system which is much more user-friendly, and people will understand that. And you look at now, Apple is everyone will agree to me that the laptops that Apple make are way better than what Microsoft was producing, right? So most important part in the end is to just stay close to your own design process. Make sure that you don't divert out of it. Maybe start having those shortcuts where you try to maybe skip certain steps, skip the research, or maybe skip the prototyping just to deliver things on time or just to meet that business goal. So yeah, this is it. This is what I had for today.
Awesome.
I'm open to questions. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah. Guys from the audience, you can start raising your hands and unmute and ask your questions. I think we got a question in the beginning. Not sure from who it was. Let me just check. Guys, we have just half an hour. You can unmute and ask your questions. I'm not able to view the chat. I think we had a question on top from, not sure how to pronounce the name, but Gobo, I think, asks, is it important for you to know how and why do you deliver a better solution that addresses the user needs and that requires a great understanding of the user job to be done? Do you want to unmute and ask? I didn't understand the question as well.
Yeah, that will be helpful.
Ada has another question. How do you get buy-in from management for a design process like this?
Yeah. So I think the only way is to that user advocacy, right?
Hmm.
People from management will come up with certain solutions which are lot more business centric, right? But the moment the whole business is actually centered to user only, no? Whatever they're making for a certain user. Only when user consume it, the business will run. So the only way to make sure that you have such kind of design process in place is to be very user centric, talk about user, be very prepared every time, I'll say, of these kind of user insights, user data, that whenever it's required, you should have it handy. You should not wait that someone will say that go and do that research and give me that insight. That will never come. That day will
Do-
never come.
it would also be helpful to make them aware of the repercussions of skipping any part of the design process and like, or compromising on some of the features or forcing users to like click the purchase button, like you said.
So
I think that.
So basically, management people might not understand that. For them, they don't know the design process. It's your responsibility that you follow that, right? So if you say that you need to do research because XYZ reason, for them it's waste of time. They'll say I'll release 2 more products between this research cycle and I'll earn more. Why do I waste time? So you will have to be very self-sufficient in that way. You have to, because if you think of it in the current scenario, everyone around us is a user, right? They are using some or the other app, and you can talk to a lot of people around you. So you have to be very handful of that. And usually in these scenarios, the customer verbatims are the most important. So when you are documenting your research, this happens that people tend to add that bias about what customer are thinking. But the moment you just write the customer verbatim, this is what they speak, this is what they talk. That
Right.
is most like that is a veto. That just trashes all kind of decision made that will just give you a different edge. So yeah, I hope that I was able to answer that.
Absolutely. I think it takes me back to one of the sessions where I spoke about UX writing, where, you know, if your target audience uses the word buy instead of purchase, they are more likely to buy it when you use the word buy on your call to action. So
Exactly,
it's like that, right?
exactly.
Vishal asks, to understand user needs, how important is it to create user personas? Does your design process have it?
So when you are creating a product from scratch, design personas are very important, because that time you are understanding or creating the understanding about your audience. Who is it? Usually, when you are working with an established company or an established, for example, a startup. Let's talk about something like Urban Company. They have already defined their user base. They already have their user persona placed. They have, for example, their salon services is made for females who are of a certain age.
Right.
The AC servicing is made for people who face AC problems with AC during the summer season, right? They already have their personas in place. To best ways to utilize them, and then maybe build over it. If you are maybe working on a very specific problem, then maybe build over it. But it's not necessary to have your personas made every time. But if you're making something from scratch, which is maybe a new product altogether, you say maybe I'll make a new social media platform.
Yeah.
At that point, you will have to have those personas in place to understand what your users are.
Okay. So how many personas do you think it's ideal to have? Because suppose we have 10 or maybe 20, then we have a wide range of scenarios that the user is in, and we might like even deviate from the solution, right?
Right.
So what would be the ideal number of?
So ideally, when you're making personas, persona is very related to cohorts, right? You don't make, but for example, if you're making an application for maybe elderly person, so the standard cohort that looks like is maybe a male person who is working, and maybe a male person who is retired, then a female person who is maybe a housewife, and then maybe female person who was working somewhere. This is kind of a generic cohort that you can make, and then that will help you to drill down in the personality little better. Otherwise, if you try to have a persona with a unique personality every time, then there is no number.
Right.
I will
Okay.
say make your personas based on cohorts, and that will help.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, so Rishikesh, do you want to unmute and ask? The question's slightly long.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I meant to ask, what if we are starting out very early on and we have a very small group of users currently, and we do receive some kind of insights and feedback from them, and we implement them into a product, and going forward in few months, since our users, the size of the users might increase, right? And because of that, we might get newer insights as well. So
Right.
does it happen that newer insights kind of coincide with the product decisions that you took before? So like how do you accommodate the newer insights so that you're still achieving the goal of solving for everyone, but you don't kind of there's no clash in between the earlier user insights like 6 months ago as compared to now?
Right. So answer to that would be that obviously this happens everywhere, that with the course of time the users behavior also change,
Mm.
right? For example, when TikTok was introduced, the kind of interaction that TikTok made, no one thought that this will be in place. And when it was introduced, people are now habitual of just scrolling. They'll just endless scroll. There's no, so the user behavior also change, and with the course of time, obviously that will induce some kind of change in the product as well. What you need to do is have that constant relationship with users. So you cannot say ki I'll do a research and I'm done. I just connected to with my users. I got their insights. I'm done, and this is what my product is. You might have to have a much more frequent interactions with them, have much more frequent evaluations with them, and also develop that trust so that they also have that understanding of the ecosystem. Every time if you go to a new user cohort, you will have to do something from scratch, right? They will have the complete learning goes for a toss. So have that kind of a relationship with users, have that cohort in place, have frequent interactions with them. And if you are making your choices right, your product will eventually go in a good direction. But if there is a scenario when something did not work out, I'll say don't hesitate to remove that. Don't just, you have to be very wise there. Just because you have taken a decision does not make sense that you have to prove it right. You can accept that, okay, this was right 3 months back, but it's not working right now. So maybe it's right, we should kind of deprioritize it and maybe work on a better solution. So be very honest on that.
Um,
That helps, thanks.
Thanks, Rishikesh. I hope I was able to answer.
Yeah, can I have a follow-up question on this?
Sure.
Please. Yeah.
Again, on the similar lines, like since we're building for a very small cohort of users, like I said, the user insights seems to be very skewed, right? Uh, are there any better ways to actually get those insights? Because for in a very early setup, it so happens that the users directly talk to you and they say, we need this, we need that. But usually it's not always that whatever users speak, they behave very differently from what they actually tell, right? So the current problem that I'm facing as a designer is like how to keep the whole thing agile and at the same time, uh, you can say separate out what they say and what they actually behave while using our product.
So would you mind maybe adding an example here?
So I would say I mean, so when I look at the product that I'm currently building, in the company that I'm working, few parts actually feel very over optimized for the small number of users that we have. I think we saw it after we build and after we implemented few features. So maybe I actually lost chain of my thoughts here, but
Okay.
yeah, in few cases we built few things what they directly told us, but maybe we still feel they are using some parts of the product more as compared to the other features we pushed because they asked us to do so.
Hmm. So one very basic thing is user does not know. User will never know the solution. That's the core. If you're going out there asking for a suggestion from a user, he might not know. As a designer, it's your job to talk about the problem first instead of talk about the solution. Ask them what is not right instead of what do they like. Talk about what is not working in their way instead of asking ki, what would you want to have on the platform, right? Because only then you will be able to generate that value in their life, and when you generate that value, you generate that loyalty and ultimately a user base which will stick to you. So don't, for example, Uber, right? Uber came in when there was no use of, when there was not even a single player who was giving that cabs services in India. We were very habitual to taking autos, right? But they, again, kind of similar to what you are saying, very small cohort, very small user group, where only maybe people who had enough money were actually able to uh, rent a cab and go for and take all these rides. But they made sure that they are very consistent with it. They're making regular updates. They are related. They are talking more about the problems that we will leave you from one place to another safely. We will take care of you in a minimal price. What user, the problems of the user, maybe money is problem, we'll give you discount. If security is problem, we'll make sure that the driver is vetted. If maybe sanity, like right now sanitization is problem, we'll make sure that every cab is sanitized and every person is sanitized before they enter, their health checkup is done. So talk more about user's problem instead of users need, and user what user want. Look, they don't know at all, to be frank. They will never know what they want.
Got it. This really helps. Thank you for answering it, Maanik.
So Vaibhav and Ada, they have a question about the tools that we can use through the design process. So what tool and to what end? Journey maps versus experience maps and user flows. I think that's a very vast question, but
So maybe if you want to unmute and maybe make it a little more specific, that will be very helpful.
So basically what I'm asking is that there are different exercises for different parts of the design process, right? And depending on what you're trying to solve for, you would use a different tool or exercise.
Right.
How do you gauge which tool to use or which exercise to conduct with your team and to what end?
To be frank, I believe that one should not be very dependent on the tools. So you should be like, I try using Figma in everything. If I have to conduct user interviews, I'll create questionnaires there. If I have to make an exercise where I would want user to pick cards and have that mapping in place, I'll make that in Figma itself. So I'll say don't be very dependent on the tools, because you might invest more time in learning that tool instead of investing more time in
Sorry,
understanding the.
by tool I mean like an exercise, not whether you're doing it in
Okay.
XD or Figma or Mural
Okay.
or whatever.
So, okay, then I think you might have to reiterate the question. I took it really.
Okay, so for example, like somebody says, okay, go out and do user research. Now, how do you decide what type of exercise to conduct? Should we do diary studies? Should we do field research? Should we do like quantitative or qualitative research? Or if somebody says that come up with like a bunch of solutions, do you decide like should we do a how might we? Should we do like a list of features and then map them across like importance versus feasibility map. Like, so how do you decide like
Okay,
what
so these are like
exercise? I
scenarios
mean,
which very
does that just come with
strongly
experience,
are
or is there
also
like a resource where you can go and check like, okay,
exactly.
what exercise should I do to
So
solve this
these are
problem?
also very influenced by the team that you're working with. So like what I do, I usually play on the strengths that I have. If I like doing ID research, I know I'm best at it. I might not be very good with maybe a card exercise or maybe something else. So I try to do that first, whatever is my forte, so that I have best insights. Second scenario is also driven by the what resources do you have in hand, because there is also a time factor. For example, in companies which already have a very strong GA in place, Google Analytics in place, the very first insight usually comes from the GA dashboard itself, where you look at how users are behaving. And then you see, okay, there is a certain change in the behavior. And then you go inside and talk about maybe onboard certain users to have an in-depth interview or maybe float out a form to get more answers. It depends on what resources you have. And my personal choices, I'm not sure if there is a standard to it, but my personal choice is that I like to play on something which is my core strength, where I know that I'll do best.
Okay, thank you.
And I think what you mentioned about using Figma, like one tool for all your processes, I think I really like that, because I thought it was unprofessional if we create and don't use the specified designated tools. But it's good to know that.
I think there are a lot of users who like to have different tools in place, but I don't personally like that, because I think I would invest, like what I said, I would invest more time to learn that tool instead of investing time on
Correct.
making things happen. And I
Yeah.
think that is very important.
Strong point. Yeah. Yogesh has a question. He says, I came from B2C background and recently switched to B2B, having difficulties to understand the user. So how to deal with this situation?
Only answer is spend more time with users.
Mhm.
Spend more time. If you are maybe working in a B2B scenario where you might have to visit warehouses, visit them, be there, make friends with them. So I'll give you maybe an example from my past. When I was working in UC, one of my charters was to work with the air condition, to basically make sure that air condition services are at par. So I was not able to understand the problem, okay, what all things go wrong, what is the user perspective, maybe something similar like what you are dealing to, because I was also coming from, I was recently switched from a customer centric scenario to this. So what I did, I tried calling certain people, and I took the numbers from the phone database. I called them up. I asked them, "Okay, I just want to shadow you, and I'll also support you. Like if you are doing your AC, I'll hold your bag and stand inside. I'll give you your tools, but I just want to be with you. I want to understand how that service functions." And the moment I started doing that, suddenly I had so many insights. Suddenly I was able to understand how they talk, what are they looking for, what are their problems. So maybe try doing that. Spend more time with your users, make some friends with them, try to understand what they are doing. That's the only solution. There is no other way. No research, no research online will ever be able to answer that.
Right. Vinay has a question. He says, any suggestions on how to manage a single product that has been customized? Some parts not huge according to different companies from a industry SaaS product point of view.
Okay. Again, and do you maybe want to make it a little more specific, a little broad?
Yeah, Vinay, I think you should unmute and ask.
Yeah, please.
Are you there, Vinay? Vinay Kumar. Suggestions on how to manage a single product that has been customized.
I just want to understand the scenario that maybe a small example might help. If you're talking about white label products, is it?
Okay, so I don't think he's going to unmute. we can move to the next question. Sorry, Vinay. Chirag is asking any quick tips for how to bring in the design process in a new startup.
I think it's very similar to like what I just talked about. So again, well, like I said, since in India, the IT industry is completely evolved in the service sector. Usually people have a strong leniency towards uh, technology development. They want to create develops. They want to start development first and then figure out how design should function. Only answer is again, be very user centric, be ready. Maybe they might not ask you to be do conduct some researches, but have have that connect with your users, talk more about users, always drive where whatever requirements you have through a user insight.
Thanks, Maanik. Maanik, I have a follow-up question to that. Like we are a very early age startup right now, and right now we don't have any user base of that sort, and I am facing problem in connecting to the actual target audience.
Hmm.
So any solution to that, or like maybe tips or something like that?
So when you say connection, are you saying you're not even able to like, find them, or do you mean you are not able to get insights out of them?
Find them right now.
That's I think a very different kind of a problem. I'll say what I usually do is I just float these kind of things in my circle. I ask everyone around. I'll maybe put a post on LinkedIn. I'll maybe tweet about it to just understand if there is anyone who would want to volunteer. And there is no shame in it. You want users, maybe put a post on LinkedIn. I'm doing this. If there's anyone who want to volunteer, please turn out. That's it.
Thanks, Maanik. Thanks.
Srija has a question. She says, hi Maanik, can you share any real-time example about a problem your team solved and how you ideated different solutions?
Okay.
Like the approach your team has towards problem solving. I think she wants to know about that.
So, okay. So I'll talk about one of the recent scenarios. So I'll talk about the Extreme app. So at Airtel Extreme, this, like I said, it's an OTP platform, and we recently launched a premium model, which gives you an access to about 13, 14 OTTs in different language and regions at a very small amount of money, right? So when we were looking at this, we were not getting enough subscription rate, to be frank, and then uh, the whole idea of that premium product was not landing. So the complete hunch started. What is wrong? What is not landing? First thing was that we had to observe how users are behaving, where are they coming, and what journeys are they actually taking, so that we can maybe if we want to put an intervention, we follow the same journey. We don't invest time in maybe adding one more tab where maybe user don't land on. So we started with an analytics tool where we tried understanding how users are behaving, how users are basically walking through the complete platform. Then also understanding falls or maybe the drops at every step. For example, from screen A to screen B, how many people drop? And when at a significant place we realized the drop is very high, we started the next step, which was user calling. We called because this is currently a COVID scenario. Obviously, people are not very comfortable in having one-to-one meetings, so we had no other option but to start calling people. So we called about hundreds of people. There was almost 4 people from my team were dedicated to this for about complete weekend, 3 days, and we were calling right from the morning till the evening. And obviously, there are scenarios where people also just shut the phone on your face. I don't want to talk. So even just trying to bear with that itself. So we tried calling hundreds of people, trying to understand what is something that is they are not trying to understand, what they're not able to understand, right? And what we realized, so there were two approaches which came in. One thing was OTT first, that people are not able to understand, not able to find their application, and that's why they're not able to subscribe to the premium plan. Second insight was that they are not able to find the content, because the hypothesis was that people relate to content first, then the OTT platform. They might know Good Luck, but they might not know that it's on Sony Live.
Mhm.
We had these two hypotheses in place. Then accordingly, we made two different UIs for it. One was very much content centric, where we were directly using the artifacts, the posters that these content have right on the face of the application, where so that they just directly relate to the content. That I want to watch Jugadistan. Okay, Jugadistan, I can see the wallpaper there. This is what thing I need. And we made one more iteration which was very much centric to the channels, the OTT channels. Like the person will land and see an option to watch Sony Live and an option to watch Lionsgate. And that now what we are doing is that we are releasing both the versions to the audience to basically understand which will work better, because
Right.
we are not the best guy to make that call. And those during the calling exercise, those were such close that making that unanimous call was not possible. And now we are observing numbers. We're observing how people are behaving, where the subscription rate increased. And accordingly, when we'll have some feedback, we'll accordingly make changes. So this is the usual process that we follow.
I hope your question is answered. Um, Roy has a question. How important is human psychology in setting up a design process? Say, for example, during the inception of an idea.
I believe human psychology is really important. It's part of a design system, because you have to understand the user. You have to be very good observer. During the phase of ideas, it takes a very important place, because the person will have to figure out where, basically the point where he is trying to push an idea on someone just because you have a bias, you think that this idea is good. And then another step where you have to maybe take a stand where you think that this idea is actually good for the users. So that is where I think human psychology is very important, where you have to understand the user, and that gives you the strength. I think maybe a little brief answer, but this is what I have in mind right now.
Dheeraj has a question. How can we find the right users for our product?
Okay, so again, I'll say it depends on the product idea. I'll say, so if you are solving a good problem that everyone needs, the eventually user will find you. Again, the example was Uber, right? Or maybe Swiggy. When Swiggy started, food delivery was almost null. Everyone preferred going out and basically having a food. The dine-in was one of the biggest thing, and almost every weekend, every Friday night, Saturday nights, there was almost very negligible possibilities to get your reservations, right? But when the moment Swiggy came in, it just changed. We had cloud kitchens. Now we have cloud kitchens. The In fact, dine-in people are now opting more for food deliveries. So
Yeah.
if you are solving a very important problem or making that impact in the user, your complete focus should be on that. That you should talk about the user problem, try to solve it consistently. It's not like you have solved once and then you are done. Try to solve it consistently, and eventually when you start making that impact, making that change in that user's life, they will come out, they will start turning out to you. And most important thing is that the best kind of user is someone who is kind of referred by someone. Like if I go out and say, start ordering from Swiggy, I really like it, chances
Yeah.
are more, and the loyalty is little more. So
Yeah.
target to those loyal users. Maybe those numbers does not matter. If you have 100 loyal users, that are more important than the 1,000 numbered users, that you have 1,000 users on place. So think about that. I hope I was able to answer. question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even Karan has mentioned here target-based marketing and running ads. I think that would be the next step as well.
So, like, you see that right now, what like Karan mentioned, you can easily go on Facebook and Instagram, maybe pay some money, get a certain base of audience. But you will
Yeah.
also see a trend that there's a difference between active audience and there's a difference between just audience, right? There might be a scenario
Correct.
where you get thousands of people from your maybe Instagram ads, but people who are actually interacting or using the platform would be much lesser. But
Correct.
if you are focused more on that number who are
Mm.
actually loyal users, they will eventually increase. And
Yeah.
that is where your business lies.
That makes sense. And Vishnu has asked here how to handle white label and customization when working on B2B products that have extensive options rather than just logo or color changes.
Okay. So white labels product are generally customized product, right? You have a product in place. For example, if you're messaging service, you send it to you make it for you basically make it for other company. For example, if Indigo comes in and say I want to buy your product, you just customize it, maybe make it a little more blue and just then gave it to them, right? This is what the white label product is. Just trying to put that little more description on that. So
Yeah.
most important part in the product in the company who's dealing with white label is the speed of development, right? That that they will be scenarios obviously where maybe a design team is of 10 people only and you might have to look into hundreds of different products, 100, because one product is being customized to different 100 different clients. So very important thing there is to have a very robust design system in place and also manage it very frequently. If you have a design system in place, the speed of that complete white labeling will increase exponentially. And obviously, you cannot say that once you have made a design system, your work is done. This design system has to evolve continuously as well. Maybe after a cycle of 3 months, you will have to again relook at it, see what's breaking, what's not breaking, and maybe come up with the new components. So my answer would be that you need to work on a very robust design system. If you have in place, this will really help you to expedite your process.
Um, yeah, Vishnu, I hope your question was answered. Um, yeah, I think that's it in the chat section. So if anyone else has a question, you can unmute or we can wrap up the session.
Yeah, please feel free.
Anyone else? And I think someone has asked me about different topics for the upcoming session. So if any of you have any suggestions, please feel free to reach out to me directly on LinkedIn and let me know what are the topics you're looking for. And we can have sessions for that and speakers for that in the next coming up sessions as well. Monali has asked, what is the best reference site to follow?
So if you were talking about, so basically there are two websites like that. One is Screenlane and one is Mobin.com or Mobin.design. I'm not able to exactly remember the name. So basically these two websites have the complete repository of screenshots of maybe hundreds of different products available. So for example, Netflix or Spotify, these people have that repository of the screenshots. What this helps you is they when so there are, like I said, at times you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So if you think that maybe a user from Spotify might be facing a similar problem, you might want to go and look at and see how they are dealing with it, and then maybe get some insights out of it. Obviously their targeted user is different, maybe your user might be different. Obviously customize that. But yeah, for me I will suggest mobile and Screenlane can be two very good, that these are the things where I keep going, and these are the places where which actually gives you a very practical approach towards your UI design as well. If you follow to dribble, there are scenarios where screens are so beautiful but not practical at all. So maybe these, you can maybe refer to these two sites.
Okay, let's take two more questions. Deepak asks, what design system do you follow, or what do we follow? An ideal design system.
So I personally started my journey with material design. The reason was because it's flexible enough and it's also usable enough. So I would say if you are starting with it, start using that. Once you are hold of it, I will suggest try developing your own design system. Only reason is when you start developing your design system, you started looking at design in a very holistic manner, in a very scalable manner. And believe me, future of design, UX design isn't making scalable designs, where you create a design which is so transparent or so scalable that it eventually himself adapts into a scenario which will, where you might not have even designed for. There are components like that where maybe the developer itself can use those components to have an AB itself, where there is no design dependencies. So I'll say start with material, develop that understanding, and then start creating your own design system.
Right. And the last question is by Shavan, how to improve expertise in product strategy.
To increase your expertise in product strategy, you will have to know more about the business behind it, or as in the business behind the products. So whenever you come across any products, try to figure out, for example, Swiggy, maybe go out there. Obviously, there are a lot of researches available. Figure out how their business model function, what kind of experiments have they done to reach at this stage. Because only either you are maybe an MBA person who has all the knowledge about it, maybe that could be a solution. Otherwise, how I have learned is through this only, that you follow a lot of products, you go out there, learn more about their case studies, understand their business model, figure out how they are earning money, what small changes they have done to basically make that impact of making user to start using more of their apps. And eventually when you start adapting it, this will help you to increase your product strategy.
Awesome. So I think we got a good number of questions today. Thanks, guys, for all the questions that you all poured in. And thanks, Maanik, for answering everything so patiently. We have come to the end of the session. If you have any more questions, you can reach out to Maanik on LinkedIn. And are you on Twitter as well, Maanik?
Not exactly. I'm not Twitter, but yeah, I'm quite active on LinkedIn. I'll be happy if you reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm quite active there. Or if you want to, maybe you can also maybe book a session on ADPList. I'll be happy to give more answers there.
Yeah. And please feel free to give all your feedback for the upcoming sessions as well, and the current session. We would love to hear it. And if you're looking to join this course as a product designer, you can feel free to look at the demo sessions that DesignBoat has every Sunday. And I think that should help you make a decision about this field. Thanks again, Maanik, for taking the time out today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. It was a good session.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maanik. Thanks.
I hope
Thank
have a
you.
good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.